I think I write for different reasons at different times in my life. I have, when I was younger, I wrote maybe to prove something to myself or to other people. Because when you're young, you don't have many ways of knowing who you are or what your value is in the world. Before you have a partner, before you have family, before you have a job or an income or a title, all of the kind of reference in the world that we're used to pointing to say, like, this is who I am, this is what my good is in the world. I think I wanted to know, I wanted to almost perform an experiment, and see what it was that I had inside of me, to see what it looked like outside of me. And then as I got older, I started to accumulate those things I could point to. Oh, I have 2 children, I have a job, I have a home, I have a city that I live in. And things start to stabilize, and then I didn't need to seek evaluations or judgments from other people. And that made writing harder, actually, because in the same way that necessity is the mother of invention, they say. Like, people who are in need tend to be more creative than people who are not in need. And so when I wasn't in need, or in the same kind of need of a reflection to send back at myself, it was a little bit harder to motivate. But I think then the reasons for writing became much more pure and good, having to do with wanting to express myself, wanting to put into words the ways that I see the world, not as kind of autobiography and not as a catharsis, but really just for the sake of expression. No. There are plenty of books that I admire and books that I think are wonderful, but I wouldn't want to have written them in the same way because I wouldn't have written them, almost by definition, you know what I mean? Like, if I would have written them, then I wouldn't be me, because the person that I am writes the books that I write. So what do I wish that I could write a book that was as, philosophically arresting as Kafka? Or do I wish that I could write a book that was as sensitive to language as Emily Dickinson? Or do I wish that I could write something that was as imaginatively flamboyant as Marquez? Yes, but I don't wish that I had written their books. I just wish that I had some of their abilities. There are not that many books that I reread all the time. They're often poetry, but in a way that's just because poetry lends itself to rereading more than novels do. The Odyssey, I go back and look at quite often. And Genesis, I look at it quite often. Just not as a religious text, but the beauty of the storytelling. How many human relationships are conveyed so quickly, and how complex they are, despite there being so few words. Books that I give away are almost always nonfiction. If there's a book that made me think about life differently, like the practice of life, not life on, nonfiction tends to deal with the practice of life as opposed to fiction, which is sort of the experience of life. So I will often give books about the practice of life. So whether it's like a political book or a book about Oliver Sacks, the last book he wrote was about giving, books about technology I often am really interested in and give to people to read, and sometimes poetry. But I can't even think of the last time I gave a novel to somebody as a gift. Well, I would hope that she would respond to one of my books, not because they are good, but because they're me. Like, And in a way, it's the same as my answer to your question: do I want to have written somebody else's book? Ultimately, you want somebody to love you for who you are, not for some idealized imagination of who you are, or for some misunderstanding of, that you are better than you actually are, but for who you are, with what's good about you and what's not appealing. So it's nice to imagine somebody reading one of my books and saying, "Oh, I really see you in this. Like, this really is an expression of you," and I loved it. Not meaning it's a great book, but meaning, like, I mean, it's funny when you say I love somebody. What do you mean? Like, do you mean that they're the most physically beautiful person you've ever seen? Probably not. That they're the most brilliant person you've ever met? Probably not. It's just like they're for you, And it's the same thing with books. Like, the books I love are just books that are for me. It's hard to explain it any more than that. And if somebody says, "Yeah, but I didn't think it was that interesting," I might say, "Okay." Or if they say, "I didn't think that it was particularly politically provocative," okay. "I didn't think the characters worked for me," fine. There's no arguing. You wouldn't want to argue. You just hope. If it's for you, that's great. The last book that I loved was probably a book of poetry by someone named Franz Wright. And it was called God's Silence. And I read that quite a bit, actually, when I was writing Here I Am. It's odd because it has absolutely nothing to do with my book, either in terms of the style or the content. But something in it, like, it had an urgency to it. It just felt like, I think sometimes when I love a book, part of what I'm loving is the book, and part of what I'm loving is the author's love of the book. You know what I mean? Like, if you ever have a really good friend or a partner who's just, like, obsessed with something, it's very easy to become obsessed with that thing as well. Even if you don't exactly care for it, you just love being a part of that person's love. Like, you want to participate or contribute to it. So in the books that I respond very strongly to, I think part of one quality they share is that it seems as if the author is in love with them. I don't really have an easy answer. My favorite hero or heroine. There's a book called Life or Theater by a woman named Charlotte Solomon. She died in the war. She actually spent most of her life in France. And it's an amazing book. And it's like 700 or 800 watercolors and gouaches with text running through them. So it's sort of a graphic novel. It's sort of a collection of paintings. It's sort of a novel. And she is the hero of the book, Charlotte. Just is a really captivating figure. He sort of already is one, in the novel of real life. He might have been a good character in a novel before he actually existed. At this point, what would be the point? It would feel there's enough real world Donald Trump to have to deal with.